Everything was going well. The customer was amazing. The customer was happy. They have now turned into a loyal customer, which means that they are now our advocates. We had press releases with them and everything was fine, which means that now they are settled. However, after like all this also, they churned because there's a press release, there's a lot of marketing around the partnership, you love the product and everything is right, but why the churn now? And then I spoke to a lot of teams also. I got to know that the sales team was trying to push a sales on them. They were not ready for that sales opportunity. It's not like selling anything to anyone out there. And they really got frustrated by that and they churned.
All right, perfect. Welcome, lifers, and thank you for joining us. You're listening to Lifetime Value, the customer success podcast, where we help you wrap up the week that was in customer success and start you off on the right foot for the one ahead of you. I am your host, the Christian Leitner of Customer Success Podcasts. My name is Dillon Young, and this week's guest is a customer success community builder, a podcast host in her own right, and a proud Duke University student. Ladies and gentlemen, we have Bhavika Kochhar on the show today. Bhavika, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you so much, Dillon. I think it's a pleasure joining you on the show. And I know the show is doing really amazing. So I'm very happy to join you on the show. And I'm really happy to share some insights for your audience.
Bhavika, first of all, did I pronounce your last name correctly?
Yeah,
Kochhar?
you're good
Kochhar?
there. Bhavika Kochhar. Yeah.
Kochhar.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Slight variation.
Okay.
But I'll take it. Bhavika, so the first thing I noted in that introduction is you are a customer success community builder. I want you to tell us a little bit about that as you tell us about yourself overall.
Sure. So, Dillon, I think community is one thing which is really important. And if we talk about community in general sense also, and not just maybe specific to customer success, community is something which gives you gives you a sense of belonging. And that's where I started from actually building the communities, because I think if you have such communities around, if you have such supportive people around, your life becomes a bit brighter. And of course, you get that support. So that's how I started. And my intention was to maybe build relationships, talk to people, understand their pain points, and that helped me grow also as a person. So when I started this journey, of course, I was working as a CSM in a full-time role, of course, in India. I've been working at different companies. But along with that, my intention was to create such communities so that people don't feel alone. They don't feel that they're fighting a battle on their own. For instance, tomorrow there could be something which you need help with, and there's some other person in the community who has already gone through that same experience. Community is that place where you can reach out to that person and get that kind of a support, because I think life is too short to repeat all the mistakes that a person has done. So why don't we learn from the mistakes of others and try to maybe like ask for help. Like asking is never a problem. You should always be open to asking. And I think community, if I specifically talk about the customer success community, I think the community is really amazing. Of course, we have people like you, people like there's so many other CS influential leaders who are actually doing such a great job. So I think it's really amazing to be in this community, and as a member of this community, and in some way, of course, building communities at different levels, I think it has helped me grow as a person a lot.
And so you mentioned doing customer success in India,
Yeah.
but now you're here in the US. Do you want to talk a little bit about that journey?
So, so I'm in the US currently. I'm of course studying at Duke. I'm based out of Durham, North Carolina, and I came to US last year. My journey in US, I think it's been a great journey. It's worth it. I think, of course, there has been a lot of struggle. There has been a lot of things because staying away from family, and then everything is not at all easy for sure. But I think. if you have the right support and if you have the right people around you, things can become easier. And I think in my scenario, of course, my family has been there from a distance though, but of course they're really very supportive. And I always say my second family is my CS community. So when I came to US, of course, I don't have any relatives in the US, but there are a lot of people who've been there for me. I've seen that. And I think I'll be thankful to them till the end of my life, for sure. I'm also part of the North Carolina Customer Success Group. So we've had a couple of meetups organized so that people can come up, people can talk to each other, and we could have those events for the people out there, and they really find it useful. Apart from that, if I talk about the specifics of what new I've been doing on LinkedIn, I would say there's something which are called the LinkedIn audio event series, which I've started new.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had two LinkedIn audio events successfully done till now, and I'm planning for the next one. And I think people love those audio event series because it's so candid, it's so casual, and like you can come up the events and you can ask a lot of questions and get those answered. So of course I'm yet to name those event series, so I'm asking for a couple of suggestions from the community and from the people out there. But I think that's one thing which is really helping a lot of people to know and understand a lot of concepts in customer success.
I've said this a couple of times before. I worship at the altar of customer success. It was a revelation when I found it. And in speaking to you before this show, I got the same sort of feeling from you of like when you found this job, when you found this community, you were like, wow, this is where I belong.
Yes.
Tell me what that was like for you. How did you find it originally? And then maybe what was that realization like for you that it's what you wanted to do going forward?
Correct. So I think this is a really good question. So this actually takes me back in the past. So I was, of course, a simple person doing my job, 9 to 5 job. I used to come back home, and that was a simple thing. I didn't even know LinkedIn. One of my friends told me one day, "Hey, you're not there on LinkedIn." I am amazed. I was like, "Okay, LinkedIn is something which maybe I should explore or something like that," but I never knew
Mm-hmm.
about it. And then of course the pandemic occurred, and I got a lot of time because my commute time got saved. So I was, of course, working from home, and that was the time I got into an introspecting mode, and I started actually thinking that maybe I could start with this, I could start expressing myself, and let's see what happens. And I started writing content, and I started doing a lot of that stuff which is already present on LinkedIn. And that's how my journey on LinkedIn, and of course customer success on LinkedIn, also actually started. And how specifically CS was that, of course, I was working at different companies. I was initially an account manager, and then I got hired as a customer success manager. Slowly and steadily I got into the domain, and of course I started understanding a lot of things. I've been part of high paced startups, and there are so many things to learn in startups. It's like it's so rigorous that you get to know everything, because at the end of the day you're wearing so many hats. So there was a time wherein I was involved in so many things. So I learned a lot of these things very quickly. And that's how CS as a domain, like I started getting attracted towards the domain, and I wanted to actually get into that. I think there's one more thing which I really love about CS is that you get a chance to connect with people. You get the chance to not just build relationships at work, but build relationships for your lifetime. And I posted something around this, I think, few weeks back, wherein one of my customers, he's been an enterprise customer, and I think a month ago or so, he just messaged me on LinkedIn and just asked me if you could just help my daughter plan her education. So it's not something that you are doing just at work. It's about building those relationships for your lifetime. So I think as a profession, it gives you that opportunity to build those relationships. And also as a person, I think I'm a very empathetic and caring person. So I love the domain per se. Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like it. There's a very obvious through line in your story of community and connection, and if you can pair that with business, I always think that's fantastic. What I think is funny, if I just relate this to myself a little, maybe narcissistically, is we are on complete opposite sides of the spectrum. I too love community, big, and have only recently found it. But I do totally agree with you of leaning on others, taking the experience of others and applying it to your own life so that you're not reinventing the wheel, like you said.
Yeah.
I recently did a personality test that ranks your strengths in, I think it's like 30 or 35 different
Okay.
areas, of which empathy is one. And there's some other ones like analytical thinking or
Okay.
strategy and
Problem
um,
solving. Yep. Mm.
problems, like all those kind of like general
Yeah.
things. And empathy was one of them.
True.
Bhavika, empathy was my lowest scoring one. It was in dead last. And so the reason I say that is I don't think you're better than me or I'm better than you.
Yeah.
What I would call out to folks is that anybody can excel in this. You've got to
Yes.
find where your strengths are and how you can speak
Yep.
to your customers and then kind of where you fit in the customer journey. But if I close the loop on this, it is just so obvious to me that you are an empathetic person, and the way you handle your customers probably
Yeah.
is you probably lean on that empathy a lot.
True. True.
Bhavika, do you want to jump into a couple of the topics that the community is talking about?
Cool. Let's do it.
Cool. So the first topic I want to talk about is the topic of renewals. I was brought to the attention of, I believe his name is, I don't know how to pronounce it, Steen Smet. He goes by Steeno. So we'll just
Okay.
call him Steeno. He wrote an article about how he handles renewals.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, it's around this idea of starting 90 days out, asking really direct questions. Would, if you had to, would you renew today? And just kind of
Right.
like basing your success plan after that, your action plan after that. In your experience,
Mm-hmm.
when do you begin the renewal customer journey? Is it at that 90-day mark?
So what I believe in, renewals, of course, uh, we want to make our customers successful so that they renew for maybe a year or a 2 year period or whatever, of course, the contract is for
Yep.
that amount of time period. But as a CSM, I never had a time period to begin thinking about renewals. For me, it's like an all time game because
hmm
if you are making your customers successful and you're talking to them, you're trying to solve their queries, issues, trying to be strategic with their development plan and success plan, of course, you don't really have to worry about how would the renewal go in that place. So I did not have this a timer on that. Okay, 90 days before this, I should start maybe talking. Yes, conversations around renewals would start talking, like would start happening. But if you ask me about specifically thinking around renewals, I was adamant on one point that I really wanted to make their experience flawless, and I have to be there for them. And when I used to be nearby, of course, renewals, because you need to start talking to them, you need to start negotiating, engaging, that stuff. Engagement, of course, goes like it's an all time thing, but talking more around on the terms, I used to start talking around, of course, like you said, the 90-day thing. But I did not have this thing in mind that, okay, I'll start thinking about it. I start thinking about renewals when that customer used to get allocated to me because I need
hmm
to make them successful. And it will only happen if the journey is right on track, if they're loving everything. That's the way I used to tackle it. So the day if it was allocated to me as a CSM, the customer was allocated to me, the customer account was in my kitty. It's my responsibility to think about the renewal from day one. Like that's how I used to work. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
There, and it's only been a couple of months since I read this, but I already forget who to attribute it to. It might actually be Greg Danes. The greatest predictor of a renewal, even if it's a year or 2 years down the road, is
yeah.
actually their implementation and how quickly they
Yes.
went live, how quickly they realized value, and everything in between. Maybe the easiest way is on a scale of 1
True,
to 10, how would they rate their implementation and their onboarding
true.
experience?
Yeah.
And so I would agree with you that I am fond of saying retention begins the day the contract is signed. So, knowing that, is there ever a time period where you say, okay, it's crunch time. In the next X amount of days, I've got to get this renewal done? Or is it typically you move right up to the renewal date? Let's like assume it's an automatic renewal, right? Just
Mhm.
assuming that they're going to renew without having a discrete conversation with them. Or in Stino's case, he'll ask them, hey, if you had to do it today, would you renew with us? Do you ever get that direct?
Yeah, I think it's very important to be direct when you're having such conversations, and not just for renewal conversations, for anything that you're talking to the customer. This question, I totally follow that yes, you should ask your customers, would you renew with us today? And you can ask this question even before the renewals also. Like they'll tell you how is the pulse of the customer. Are they liking it? Are they not liking it? And like you said, Dylan, implementation is one such thing which is really important. They want to know how has their experience been, was it flawless for them, and then of course there are many pictures, like there are many things in this picture. Then second thing which I think which is very important is that yes, of course CS is something that starts post sales, but I'd like to give an example here for a situation wherein I was involved with a customer in the pre-sales phase also. Why? Because of course sometimes as a CSM your sales team tell you that okay, we are trying to pitch this customer and you're already handling a similar customer. Can you just come on a call and try to explain them that how is your experience been with the customer or how you're making them
Yeah.
successful? That's how I've been
Hmm.
in touch with them in the pre-sales phase also. Uh, and when you start getting in touch with your customer, I think that's where your engagement with the customer starts. And you should really be direct in your questions. And trust me, they love honesty, they love your authenticity. So if you actually tell them, okay, it's been 4 years down the line that you are of course with me and I'm handling your account as a CSM, I really want to check on the fact that are you liking the experience? If given a chance to renew today, would you renew or not? And if you can be just candid about it, please let us know. Because if no also, then I have rest of course the maybe the 8 months. If it's a 1 year renewal kind of a cycle, I still have 8 months to turn that decision around. But you need to ask to do that.
Yeah, and that Stino said the same thing. His whole thing was if you ask the question and it's no, or there's
Yeah,
any level of hesitation, they don't jump out of their chair and say yes, absolutely. Then you've got
yeah,
to go to work on a success plan to shore that
correct.
up. Have you ever asked that question and it felt as though you could have renewed them, and you ask the question and they say no, and then they fail to renew?
I think I'm generally in touch with my customers all throughout, and I try to ask if
Hmm.
they're liking it or not. It has not happened to me yet. Like they're if they've been
Hmm.
liking it, they've been liking it, and they renew also. If they are not liking it, I try to make sure that what kind of expectations do they have more. So I might get into a one-on-one chat with a stakeholder, with a champion out there, and try to understand what's getting wrong or what's wrong. Let's just try working on that.
Yeah.
But it's not yet happened with me till date. Yes, there have been scenarios. By what I mean here, like I like to quote an example here of a customer. Everything was going well. The customer was amazing. The customer was happy. They have now turned into a loyal customer, which means that they are now our advocates. We had like press releases with them, and everything was
Mm.
fine. Which means that now they are settled. However, after like all this, also they churned, and yes, they churned. Yes. And that was the situation wherein I was like, why? Because there's a press release, there's everything, there's a lot of marketing that's happening, there's a lot of marketing around the partnership, you love the product, and everything is right. But why the churn now? And then when I
Hmm.
introspected, and of course, I spoke to a lot of teams also, I got to know that the sales team was trying to push a sales on them, wherein it was actually like they were not ready for that sales opportunity. And you need
Hmm.
to know this thing that okay, if you can pitch them things, but do a value based selling. It's not like selling anything to anyone out there. And they really got frustrated by that and they churned. So I think even after the customer becomes your loyal customer, they become your advocates, it is very important to have that consistent uh, like experience with them. Because what happens when the account management, so that was a small startup, so the sales team used to handle the account management stuff and all that also. So that's why
Hmm.
they were trying to push that sales, they were trying to maybe increase the contract value or something like that they were trying to do, which I don't really remember right now, but they were trying to push that sales on them. And as a CSM, of course, I was not involved in that, because of which it happened.
Hmm. Can I
Yeah,
ask you this?
yeah.
First of all, a statement. Never in my life, this is the power of community, have I so often had conversations with folks as I do on this podcast that are so eerily close to situations I'm dealing with in my professional career. So that example you just gave, I have not experienced churn, but I have experienced every other piece of that, which is the left hand not knowing what the right hand is doing, so to speak, when it comes to the customer relationship, for which we are ultimately accountable for. But there are a lot of other people, particularly in enterprise situations. There are a lot of other people from your organization that are probably touching, communicating with,
Yeah.
asking things of actors within your
Yeah.
customers' organization. And there's a ton of risk in that. It's one thing I would recommend folks to try and get visibility into that as soon as possible, no matter how small your organization is. To your point,
Yeah.
right?
Yep. Yep.
Now,
Yep.
my question to your
Yeah.
scenario would be: what did you learn, and what could you have done better in that scenario to try and effectuate a different outcome?
Right. You're very right there, Dylan. There are so many things that happen. We should always focus on what can we learn from this situation. So I think what I learned out of it, that the processes are broken. Of course, the CS team doesn't know
Sure.
that what is the account management team doing, and the customer success knows about, okay, what has been happening when the customer churns, which is really really sad. Like you mentioned, it's like they're all the wheels, right? And they should be connected to each other. If they're not
Mm-hmm.
connected, and if they work in solo, the car is bound to like go down.
Fall
It'll
apart.
not work
Yeah.
out for sure. Yeah, yeah, it'll not work out for sure.
Blow
So
up.
that was one
Yes.
thing that I learned. And my learning, like if you talk about my career trajectory in whichever company I work, I always make sure that I spend time on processes. If your
Mm.
processes are right, then your experience for the customer would automatically be right. That's what I have learned. And that was the thing that I actually saw, that yes, this is where as an org we need to make some changes in the process, so that two different teams should be aware about what's happening on the same customer, because otherwise it's very difficult to track, because you're emailing the customer as well, I'm emailing the customer too, and sometimes what happens, the customers come back to us and ask us, whom should I ask this query? I'm confused,
Mm-hmm.
because they
Mm-hmm.
don't know about what's happening inside, right? So, and it's not their job. We need to make that experience useful and wonderful for them. And that can only happen when the teams are in touch, when there is a coordination between the team, because that was one thing that I really learned out of that, that okay, the processes need to be set right. So yeah, that was my learning for that scenario.
Well, I think that's a best case scenario if the customer is coming to you and saying, "Hey, I've got a problem I'd like for you to help me solve. Who do I ask this of?" Whereas I think what's more apt to occur is they come to you and say, "Hey, I've got too many people reaching out to me and talking to me. I've got a
Yeah.
day job to do.
Yep.
Leave me alone."
Yep.
Right? That's
Yep.
what I've experienced more.
Yep.
Okay, let's talk about customer happiness.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have a podcast by Update AI called Unchurned. They do a
Yeah.
report, catch up every 2 weeks with CS Insider and CS Insider's biweekly report that they do.
True.
They recently hosted a gentleman by the name of Damian Howley, who wrote a
Hmm.
book,
Yes.
Controlling Your Customer.
Customers. Yeah.
I haven't personally read it, but it sounds intriguing. I think I'm going to pick up a copy. And in that, he talks about. I'm certainly paraphrasing. He brought this up in the podcast that he doesn't actually believe this, but he does not track customer happiness as a metric, or he does not recommend tracking customer happiness as a metric because it pales in comparison to the ability to provide value and
Yeah.
value realization. And again, I'm totally paraphrasing, not putting words in Mr. Howley's mouth. But I want
Yeah.
to ask what your experience has been with the conversation of customer happiness. Does it matter? Does it not? Is it just a kind of a tertiary statistic that you track? Do you not track it at all? Like, how do you think about customer happiness?
Right, right. So yes, like you said, Dylan, this topic has been really controversial, and of course, with customer happiness, there's a topic that also comes around NPS and a lot of that stuff.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a lot of people, like there are two worlds I think in this. There's some people who feel that NPS is actually not something that one should track. That can really not measure customer happiness or customer experience. There's some people who believe in NPS. So I'll tell you my take. I think customer happiness or finding it through a metric and stuff like that, you can try understanding more about the customer, but these metrics won't actually tell you like if your customer is happy or not. Like that's something these metrics actually cannot track. That's what has been in my experience. There have been a lot of angles to this. When we talk about the happiness or the customer experience or maybe the NPS scores, if someone gives you if someone gives you maybe a 9 on 10 or a 10 on 10, sometimes people like they're so much in a haste. They got a survey popped up and they just click
Mm-hmm.
something like that.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't really show that okay, they are actually happy with you or not. What I follow and what I think is a really I would not say a perfect thing because of course there's always a scope of improvement. But one thing that I follow is I get on calls with these customers, and that call will not be centered around maybe an upcoming renewal or this feature not working or that feature not working. The call will be titled as a knowing more about their experience. What has been the pluses? What has been the minus? What do you think should really improve? And that really helps me understand if they are happy or not, because the CSM can only know this when they actually get on such calls with the customer and try to understand. Having these metrics in place is good till a limit, but they're not a sure short indicator of their happiness. That's what I feel.
So does this loop back to our question around on those calls? Will you ask, "Hey, if you had to today, would you renew with us?" Is that kind of the level of directness that you're getting to on those conversations?
On those calls, I would not actually touch upon renewals. Renewal is a different conversation altogether. I know they are linked. If they'll be happy, they'll anyway renew. You are very right
Mm-hmm.
there. But the agenda of that call is to have that one-on-one connect with the customer and see how likely are they to recommend us to their
Mm-hmm.
network, or if they are not, then why not, what are the reasons, is there something that they have been bothered. Sometimes what happens as a person or as a human being, of course you're dealing with humans and not machines, and people can be bothered by a lot of things, but they've not given a chance to talk, or maybe they did not speak anything because there was not a time slot for them to talk. They might ignore something. But if you tell them that these 30 minutes are all about what you have been feeling all this while, are you fine, are you not fine, is there something that you think needs improvement, this is our time, so just be candid. And on this call, this is between you and me. I am your CSM. I am your voice inside my organization. I'm here to make you successful. So I need to know what's going on in your mind so that I can route those things internally in my organization. There are a lot of times, the customers also get absorbed. Okay, they are also chasing their goals, right? They are also chasing their
Mm-hmm.
metrics. So they might go on these like they might come on calls with different conversations. Okay, this feature isn't working, Bhavika. Can you help us with this? Or can you help us getting trained on this feature? Our new team
Yeah.
is coming up. They want this kind of a training. Could you help
Mm-hmm.
us, etc.? So they're so absorbed with their, of course, metrics and everything that they don't get that time to be candid and to open their heart out. They really feel good because you, at the end of the day, going to them and asking them for their time, maybe just 15-20 minutes, and talking to them about their experience, they feel that you really care about them. Otherwise, what happens, I've seen people doing this nearby renewals and stuff like that. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, they understand that, okay, the renewal is just in 2 months, and that's why you are coming to me with this call. No, it should happen along the way. It should happen in the journey. That's what
Mm-hmm.
that has been working for me all this while, to be honest with
So I think we're speaking the same language. I think the question around, "Hey, would you renew today?"
you. Yeah,
is a very pointed
yeah,
method for me to understand, are you happy? Are you happy today?
yeah,
What would you do if you had to today? I do agree that it becomes transparent and maybe a little bit ugly if you only
yeah,
schedule this, 2 weeks before their renewal window closes.
yeah,
It smells fishy, right?
yes,
But I might push back a little bit that asking the renewal question as a
hmm,
measure of sentiment is okay. It's okay,
yep,
no matter when it happens on the timeline. And
yep,
maybe that's just my personality. Maybe it's
sure,
about making sure that you set an expectation like, hey, this is really actually just for me to get a sentiment measure on you. It doesn't matter what the question is. Just tell me whether you're happy or not, what I
True.
can fix, what I can
Yeah.
shore up to make sure that we can continue this relationship. But I think we're on the same page there.
Sure. Yeah, and like you said, I think it's more around personality also. So, and it's okay. It's just about how you put that question across. The agenda is to get their sentiment and understand the sentiment. I might ask it in a different manner. You might ask it in a
Yeah.
different manner, but we're on the same page, like you said. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, Bhavika. So we've talked quite a bit and your sunny disposition has shown through. But now I'd like to take us to a segment a little bit closer to my heart, which is one we refer to as BS in CS.
Biggest load of crap I've ever heard.
Number one bullshit. Oh, number one bullshit.
Bhavika, if you could choose one, what is the trend, catchphrase, or otherwise related to customer success that you would like to see done away with forever?
I think NPS is one such thing, which I think NPS does not really track what it really should, and it should. I'm a strong proponent and strong believer in the fact that it does not measure customer happiness. I am part of that set of segment instead of set of people segment who really don't believe in NPS.
Let
I
me
know
ask you
there.
this, Bhavika.
Yeah.
I'm going to cut you off because NPS has been maligned more times than I can count. So here's what I'll say. I don't disagree with you. So there's a bunch of different survey scoring methods, right?
Right. Right.
That aren't NPS. CSAT, customer effort score. Are
Yeah.
those ones that you do buy into, that you believe in, you think are better?
Yeah.
What would the measurement tool be if not NPS for measuring customer happiness? Like, what do you think should replace NPS if NPS doesn't do what it purports to do?
I think if NPS, if we really remove NPS from here, I would say that I want to have a metric which is more measurable and is more practical, and it's not just maybe customers are getting that survey bumping up on the platform or a SaaS tool, and they're just putting how likely are they are to recommend and stuff like that. Maybe they should also be given an option to write something so that we know that okay,
Mm.
if they've been like if they have given 9 on 10 or 8 on 10, then why is it so? Secondly, I also think just collecting NPS feedback is also not really useful. There have been
Mm-hmm.
scenarios that I have seen in the past wherein uh, the NPS was getting collected, the customers are giving the feedback, but there has been no action on that. And because of which, I came with a project at a company. I said, this is really not done. If at all the customers are giving us a honest feedback, we need to act on the feedback, right? And now there was an automation that I did on the HubSpot tool. So what I did was from the platform, when we get these scores, I created a workflow which would link to the Slack workspace of that particular CSM. So the CSM would get a message that, hey, your customer XYZ gave you a score of 5 on 10. Please reach out to them with an action as well. If you've got 9 on 10 from a customer, then please reach out to them for a case study if it has not happened already, or please reach out to the customer for some other marketing event that's happening. So it's about connecting those scores with an actionable so that CSMs have that kind of a clarity that what next? If I've got an 8 on 10, what should I do with the customer next? And that's where I think there are a lot of companies that they're confused because they collect the feedback, that's fine, but what next? What are we doing on that feedback? And if we're not doing on anything on that feedback, then let's get rid away with NPS. That's what I feel.
I'm a little bit torn on this because NPS is meant to measure the performance of all other activities. And so if you start doing activities just to drive up NPS, it doesn't feel like a holistic approach to your customer's experience. Then, I mean, that becomes the definition of a vanity metric, right? Where you're just trying to drive up NPS and not necessarily working on the entire experience for your customers. Now, I know that's not always the case, right? And if you do it right, you're supposed to be kind of like
Yeah,
up leveling everything at the same time, and NPS comes along with it. But I
yeah,
think that is something for folks to be aware of is as you try to drive up NPS, are you doing it superficially or is
yeah,
it in a way that actually materially improves your customer's
yeah.
experience overall?
True, true.
You are in great company, ton of folks on the podcast, and overall, just do not like NPS. So you're not alone there. And a lot of folks have said the same thing of like it doesn't get actioned on the back end, or it's not being measured appropriately. What I
Yeah,
will say to one point you made is I do know a lot of folks who ask for detail around why a customer gave the score they did. What I have found personally in my professional career, I should say, is they very rarely enter anything, which goes back to your point of they did it to get it out of their face.
yeah,
And I wonder, this is an open question,
yeah.
whether we are valuing scores the same from folks who leave no comments and from folks who do leave comments, because I would think the folks that do leave comments are more engaged. Can you
Yes.
weight that score a little more heavily? I don't know. I'm just kind of like thinking out loud here at this point, but those are all the things that I think you've got to be able to answer those questions. You've got to have a rock solid
Yeah,
strategy if you're going
yeah,
to go measure NPS and take or make decisions based on it. Because if you don't have a
yeah,
rock
yeah.
solid strategy, you don't have a rock solid understanding of why people are answering the way they do. You're
Right.
just kind of like you're just out there doing stuff. It's very
True,
hard to define whether it's actually successful.
true, true. It's really vague, I think I would say. That's one thing which is there. And that's why I think at, like, of course, in my journey at one of the companies, I came up with something which is measuring customers' happiness through both qualitative and quantitative factors. Now, of
Mm-hmm.
course, there could be a lot more that can be done, but I was handling this project wherein I wanted to come up with a customer happiness kind of a score, like you just mentioned, and not just lean on NPS. So, in qualitative section, things that I had put in was the engagement with the customer. Of course, that comes with the sentiment, the way CSM engages with the customer. Qualitative could be how are they responsive? Do they get on calls and stuff like that? Quantitative could be the number of support tickets that they have raised, right?
Mm-hmm.
The NPS score could be one if you want to use that. The CSAT score could be one. How are they rating our support tickets? Have the support tickets being open for a long time, or are they reopening the tickets again and again? They'll be the quantitative factors, and that's how I came up with a formula that would get us to qualitative and quantitative factors combined. Because
Mm-hmm.
just measuring anything on NPS is, like, in my opinion, it's too vague. It's vague.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bhavika, let's wrap it up. And the first question I always like to ask is who is your CS player of the week? So, who out there is moving the customer success profession forward in the past
Mhm.
7 days that you would like to give a shout out to?
There's someone whom I really admire, and I think he is amazing with everything. And he's, of course, Jay Nathan. He's
Mm-hmm.
one who's been doing a great job in a lot of things, and not just in CS, but as a person also. He's a mentor for me. There is a lot that he's doing. The community Gain, Grow, Retain. I think they're having wonderful meetups for the people to come forward and join and like share learnings. He's doing a really amazing job, and I think we are blessed to have him in the community. Yeah.
Yeah. Shout out Jay Nathan. All right. Referrals and recommendations. If you could take the audience members and point them in the direction of any one thing or activity, and it does not have to be customer success related, what would you recommend to folks?
One thing that anyone out there should try to do, having a me time for themselves. That
Mm,
is really very, very important. And as CSMs, things are so overwhelming. Uh, like you go crazy sometimes because there's so many things to take care of. So it is very important to take out maybe 30 minutes, 45 minutes, of course, depending upon your schedule per week, and sit with yourself. In that me time duration, you can do a lot of things. Maybe you just don't want to do anything, that's also fine. Or you might want to read a book like this one I'm reading right now. So the Chief Customer Officer Playbook, which I'm reading currently. So so and just try to find out time for yourself, because like I always say, be kind to yourself, because unless you are okay, you won't be able to be a resource for the others.
Yeah.
So just be okay, be find time for yourself, meditate, read books, or don't do anything. If you feel like you really don't want to do anything, that's also fine. Like, it's not a must thing that you have to do something. You can just rest, that's also fine. So
Yeah.
I think I would say that life is too short to run after a lot of things, and that's perfectly fine. But it's important to give yourself some breaks so that you can rejuvenate. That's really, really important.
Yeah, I agree. I think the goal there is to stop and think about
Yeah.
yourself
Yeah.
and do whatever is best for you. I mean, that can take any form, right?
Yep.
But the idea is to always be asking that question of what do I need, right? You can't lose sight of that.
Yep.
Bhavika, where can folks connect with you?
So I'm reachable on LinkedIn. I think I'm very active on LinkedIn. So if
Mhm.
anyone wants to know more about my journey or just want to have a one-on-one chat, shoot me a DM. I would be happy to talk to you.
That's great. Bhavika, this has been a ton of fun. You are a ray of sunshine and a great source of knowledge when it comes to customer success. So thank you so much for being here and for taking time out of your day to talk with me.
Thank you so much, Dylan. I think it was lovely talking to you, and the way you asked the questions and the way you were with with me in this journey, like of course a 1 hour journey for sure. It's been really great. So thank you so much for having me on the show, and I'm really excited for the success of the show.
You've been listening to Lifetime Value, the podcast for customer success professionals. If you like what you've heard, please rate our show and subscribe wherever you find your podcast. Please note that the views expressed in these conversations are attributed only to those individuals on this podcast and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of their respective employers. For all inquiries, please reach out via email to Dillon@lifetimevaluepodcast.com. Find us on YouTube via our channel Lifetime Value, and find us on the socials at Lifetime Value Podcast. Until next time.
Hey folks, this is Bhavika Kochhar from the Lifetime Value, the Customer Success Podcast. Do not miss the episode at all, and let me know how you find it.
I like it.